great panel. Thank you, Deborah, and everyone who participated. So we have one more excellent speaker for you today. But as we near the end of the day in our beautiful room here in the Senate, I just want to recognize a few organizations and people. First, again, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. The Future Space Leaders Foundation can only do what we do because our sponsors provide the resources, the time, the commitment to make this foundation exist. So thank you to Advanced Space, AI Solutions, Blue Origin, Boundary Stone, Bryce Tech, the Brooke Owens Fellowship Program, Relativity Space, Rocket Lab, Space Intel Report, Virgin Galactic, Voyager Space, and the Z Factor Fellowship. So thank you all to our generous sponsors. I'd also like to thank some people, some individuals who really pulled together today to make this happen, to make this work. First and foremost, that's the Future Space Leaders Board and the team who pulled together the speakers and the lineup of sponsors. But most importantly, I'd like to thank our executive director, Yasmin, who you've seen running around making this whole event happen. Without her tireless effort over the last several weeks, this event doesn't come together as great as it does. So thank you, Yasmin. And also the team supporting Yasmin, Danielle, Tara, and Amanda have also done a great job, so thank them as well. So now I'd like to turn it over to one of our 2022 fellows, Chris Nye, who's a Senior Business Development Manager for Advanced Programs at Sierra Space, to introduce our next and final speaker. Thank you, Chris.
Hi, everybody. So when I was reflecting to think about how to introduce our last speaker today, I was thinking about some of the conversations that I had today about how tight-knit the aerospace community is, specifically in space. And I think our last speaker does a good job of representing that fact. If you haven't had the chance to meet Chirag yet, you probably know somebody who knows him, and you most likely know somebody who knows somebody who knows him. He's kind of like the Kevin Bacon of space. And in his current role, he's the Assistant to the President and Executive Secretary for the National Space Council. So please join me in welcoming our last speaker today, Chirag Parikh.
Hi. Hopefully you don't need this. Do we need this? Is this to remind me who I am? We'll just put this here so I can see you guys. Hey, first of all, thank you guys for making it all the way to the end of the day. I know there's a lot of speeches, a lot of good advice, and I appreciate the time that you guys have taken to learn, to educate, and hopefully we can have a conversation as well along there. So, yes, you know, out of show of hands, I'm curious, who doesn't know who Kevin Bacon is by the chance? See, there's a few hands there, so that's a generational thing here. So, no, Christopher, thank you very much for the introduction, and of course, future space leaders. I've had the pleasure of speaking to this group on multiple occasions, and it's so great to be able to come back and talk to you guys here. You know, I think it is only incumbent upon all of us, and I know Dr. Zurbuchen had just a fantastic speech earlier today, to just reference for a moment. Of course, I think every speech I'm sure has talked about the James Webb Space Telescope and what we've seen and observed, and everybody can kind of take to it what it means to them. You know, for me, it's so many things. You know, if you think about you just think about the fact of it means science, it means opportunity, it means discovery. But you know what it also means, and when I think about it from our National Space Council perspective and our role in the U.S. government and as a critical ally and partner around the world, like it means international partnerships. It means really, and you just heard about in the last panel, it means really high-tech STEM jobs. It means manufacturing, right? It means it means opportunity, and it means, of course, inspiration. And we can just bask in all these things. And when you think about it, when I was a kid, I think all of us, I'll ask this question, a show of hands in a second here, but who right now that's not in this group, in this sector, who saw those images, whether the one that the president released and the vice president a day before yesterday, or the ones that were released at Goddard yesterday, right now there's somebody that is 10 years your junior, maybe even more, maybe even 10 years your senior, maybe more, who says, gosh, that's the spark, that's what I want. That means something to me in their own personal way. And for me, I was a second grader when I saw a space shuttle launch. And I'm like, that. For what it's worth, the career transition right before that was garbage man. I got paid $1 per week. It was amazing. And so I'm like, this is what I want to do. And it's so amazing that we've all had the opportunity in one way, shape, or form to be part of this amazing community. And whether you've had the opportunity to be 1 or 2 degrees of separation from not just me, but from each of yourselves, you're going to learn to love this community in a way that I can't even imagine, and you can only experience it. And so by a show of hands, for me, it was literally a moment spark, and literally an ignition of the shuttle engines that said, I want to be a space person. Now, my career transition of desires from astronaut to astronomer to ultimately aerospace engineer, and then we'll talk about the career path a little bit later. But just out of show of hands, I'm just curious, because I try to do this in every venue I can. How many people, can you imagine back to the moment where you wanted to do space, or was it more just you ended up here? Just out of show of hands. That's amazing, right? So we're talking about at least 3/4 of the room where it was not any campaign-related thing. It was just something that happened because space is permeated across the world. I was talking to Yasmin outside here, and one of the things that we realized, how many of us wanted to be a space person way, way young in our lives? But when you think about what do you want to be when you're young, it's what you see. And often what you see is a musician or an actor or an actress. You see a doctor or a nurse. You see a teacher. You see your parents. You see an athlete. But you know what also is one of the things that you see for whatever reason, and it's so great in this industry? It's space. And it's such a spark of people's careers along the way. And so, from a kid who wanted to be a garbage man, right, to, now being able to have the opportunity to sit at the White House and have opportunities to brief the president and the vice president of the United States of America, it's a pretty significant thing. And it doesn't matter what what James Webb does to you or others. Like, you might be an astronaut. You may want to become an astrophysicist. Just the beauty of that might just make you want to become an artist. It doesn't matter. It's just that you have a plethora of opportunity along the way here. So, as introduced, I work at the Space Council. I'm the executive secretary, so I take care of the day-to-day elements of the execution of all the different national space policies and strategies. We write the policies and strategies, but far more importantly, there's so many of them on the books that we also implement many of these policies and strategies, and then that is a very difficult thing. And you cannot implement policy without good budget and without good partners and without good teammates. And so we try to develop good teams, we try to develop the budget along the way. Who is the Space Council? The Space Council in this administration is much larger than the Space Council has ever been before. As a matter of fact, we have 13 departments and agencies, heads of departments and agencies, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Administrator of NASA, Director of National Intelligence, that are members of the Space Council, as well as 7 entities from within the White House. One of those entities, of course, is Vice President Harris. She's the chair of the Space Council. But we also have the National Security Advisor, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and many others. But there's a couple members that I think is worth noting that are new to the Space Council, and I want to make sure that people very clearly understand this. Space isn't just what's in space. Being in the space industry doesn't mean just building satellites and operating satellites. We have the Department of Agriculture in the Space Council. And the reason the Department of Agriculture is in the Space Council is because they are significant users of space capabilities. We have the Climate Advisor on the Space Council because so much of what we learn about what happened, what is happening, and predicting what will happen is from space-based sensors. We have the Department of Education on the Space Council. We brought them on board because the future is bright, and we need to be able to bring capabilities in. And then last but not least, just to highlight one of the members, the Department of Labor. Why would the Department of Labor be on the Space Council? The reason is because we clearly need STEM professionals. We also need skilled labor. As a matter of fact, on the December 1st Space Council meeting, I believe it was the Secretary of Education who said, on the launch pad, do you know who the best friend of an astronaut is? It's the welder. who put together the capsule that he or she's in at that point, right? So we need all different types of skills. We need all different types of capabilities. I'm not going to talk too much about policy. I'm happy to take some questions at the end if you want to go into that world, but I just want to at least touch on some of the issues that we're working on. Obviously, this is a subset of the gigantic enormity of many different issues as we have the nexus of commercial, civil, and national security space all coming together in a rapid manner here. And you have international partners and allies who are developing their own capabilities. And as you've probably heard through the course of the day, you also have strategic competitors who are developing capabilities as well that could interfere with our ability to be able to protect our capabilities, our ability to spread democracy around the world as well. So, but some of the things, look, first and foremost, exploration and science. You look at the NASA budget, for instance, it was an 8% increase. A significant portion of that is for space exploration. The Artemis program, particularly as we bring back Americans to the moon, first female to the moon, first person of color to the moon. I mean, it's almost unimaginable to think about the impact that human spaceflight in the next 4 or 5 years is going to have on the future of this nation. And it's exciting at the same point. Some areas we have to think about from a sustainability perspective. We think about all the different climate sustainability challenges that we have here on Earth. Similarly, we have to think about the sustainability of what's on orbit as well. And we start thinking about the debris problem. We start thinking about large constellations of satellites. How do those all coexist together? Who tracks that? Who notifies people? Who moves left? Who moves right? These are hard problems. These are hard challenges, and we are working with across departments and agencies to be able to figure these elements out. There's other regulatory matters as well. So as people start developing capabilities on the moon, as people start developing hotels in space, how do you go about being able to make sure that we have them in a safe and responsible manner? Hopefully you guys saw Vice President Harris back in April announce a norm of behavior. That's a very big policy effort that we're pushing, is space norms of behavior. And the norm that we announced was that the United States will not conduct debris-forming anti-satellite missile tests. And we haven't done that in a very long time. But particularly as what we've seen, back in November, what the Russians did and what the Chinese did a little bit over a decade ago, it really harms not just our national security apparatus, it harms everything that we want to do in space, from exploration to commerce to science, and so on and so forth. So we thought that was a very important step along the way. I think one thing particularly that you should note is, and I alluded to this earlier, is international cooperation. Space is an element of diplomacy, very clearly. And NASA, of all departments and agencies, is quite the leader in that. The NASA emblem is world-renowned. You see it on the streets of Washington, D.C., right next to the FBI shirts and so on and so forth. Just everybody knows it and everybody loves it. And how do we partner with countries to be able to solve things like STEM through NASA and State Department and even the DoD? How do we do this to talk about climate change? The sensor that's looking on this side of the Earth, as it rotates to the other side of the Earth, it can look at other places. And so that's what we're looking at with respect to partnerships. We're also looking at climate, and we're also looking at STEM. And again, there's a lot of different things going on. We have a great team, and we have a great interagency on that. But that's what I'll talk about on the policy front, and happy to talk in more detail, afterwards or whatnot as well. But I do want to talk a little bit, particularly as you've heard so many different people here, and you may or may not want to envision yourself in these roles in the future. And so how does somebody who wanted to be an astronaut, garbage man before that, right, all of a sudden, have the opportunity, actually this is my second time now at the White House, but have the opportunity to be able to support, some incredible leaders in our administration here. And I, astronaut, astronomer, aerospace engineer. Got my degree in aerospace engineering, and I was going to build satellites. I geeked out when the New Horizons probe went by Pluto, because, swear to God, we were at Johns Hopkins for the big event, and they have a little table with some people, and they had some Jet Propulsion Lab folks there, I was talking to them, and I said, "What do you do?" Like, "Oh, we calculate trajectories out to different outer planets." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like you don't have no idea. Like this would be like somebody meeting an astronaut, for the first time. I had that exact same experience because I wanted to calculate trajectories, and these are the folks that did it for Voyager. These are the people that did it for Galileo, did gravity assist trajectory maneuvers, and I fanboyed out like crazy. And it right, but for each and every one their own way. And I thought that's what I was going to be, and I was looking forward to working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at the time. Instead, I went to the Department of Defense. I went to the intelligence community. And instead of looking at building our satellites, I was looking at adversary space programs to look at how they are threats to our space sectors. And kind of maybe to think about this from an aperture, like your experience, as junior workforce now or as aspiring workforce is how do you grow your aperture of experience along the way? And so at that point, I was looking at particular countries' threats to our space systems. And I was going to do this job in Ohio, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, for the rest of my life, because that's what people did. You became a deeper and deeper expert on that particular issue, and I was fine with that. And if I got to do that for the rest of my life, I would have had a successful career. But then I had the opportunity to go and do a detail here in Washington, D.C. back in 2008. And now I got to oversee the entire space intelligence community. It wasn't just one organization, multiple organizations looking at this. Now I got to see this from all their different, literally and figuratively speaking, apertures, from different intelligence perspectives. And now I got to look at it across all the different countries, the threat countries. And I thought, man, if I get to do this job for the rest of my life, I've been a successful person. Along the way, I had the opportunity then to represent the intelligence community at the White House when the National Security Council was having meetings on President Obama's space policy. And I got to go to the White House. And I'm like, well, this is great. And I've never been to the White House before. And that was an amazing moment. And then we got to go again the next week, and then twice a week. And then Lori was in several of these meetings, and 3 times a week. And suddenly going to the White House was seemingly like, oh boy, here we go again. And you're working on sentence by sentence sometimes along the way. But I'm like, wow, I get to represent the entire intelligence community at the White House. If I get to do this for the rest of my career, I got a successful career. Somewhere along the way, I got the opportunity then to go and work for President Obama and the National Security Advisor on the National Security Council. So now my aperture opens. Now I'm on the National Security Council. Now it's defense and intelligence programs primarily. And this is before there was a space council. The Obama administration did not have a space council. So it was me and my Office of Science and Technology policy counterpart. He or she looked at the civil element, I looked at the national security element, and then we combined on commercial elements along the way. And it was, and Rich was one of the ones right there. Hello, Rich. And I'm like, wow, now I got to focus on blue, as we call it, at space. I got to focus on defense and intelligence programs and all these threats. I got to figure out what to do with how to look at that. And so I had to take with the threat piece and open my aperture to look at what the U.S. programs were. And I'm like, well, if I get to do this for the rest of my life, it'll be a long life, but there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems. Most people usually go about 2 years. I went about 5 years, a little over 5 years at the White House. I'm like, wow, but it was amazing. I never thought about these things. I never saw these things. And it was amazing to have that experience and that aperture of opportunity. From there, I took a little bit of a detour. I went back into the intelligence community from being a manager of one person with, my boss's boss being the president, to now being the manager of 500 people to do operations in the intelligence community. And that was a whole different aperture to be able to learn leadership, learn principles, learn management along the way. I went to the private sector for a couple years after that, and I realized just how challenging sometimes it can be in the private sector when you're trying to work with the government sector or you're trying to work with other companies. And that experience grew. And then the phone call came and said, we'd like you to come work at the White House. And now you are going to be the executive secretary of the National Space Council. So now my aperture has grown from just defense and intelligence and threat to not just commercial, but now the aperture has grown to civil space programs, all the commercial opportunities that we have, international foreign policy and opportunities for partnerships, and of course national security along the way. And so the aperture continues to widen, and I think one of my staff asked, what are some of the, how do you fit into the space world? when you're young, and now having 25 years of experience, look kind of backwards. If I can pithy it up into three different things here. One I've talked about, which is experience. You can have experience in a particular company, in a particular government organization, and do great in any one of those things. You don't have to, move around as much as I've had along the way. The second one is knowledge. I spent my first 10 years working in a cubicle, trying to figure out the best assessments along the way, and became really good at what I did. I still use that as an underpinning. Analysis is analysis is analysis, and I thought that was really helpful. Just become an expert at what you are now, as opposed to just moving forward here. And then the last one is the power of your network. Now, when I grew up in Ohio, we didn't have all these different groups along the way. I think particularly the fact that you guys were going to be kind of like the tide, in a sense, because all your careers will most certainly rise at a parallel pace. There may be some that are a little bit higher, a little bit that are lower, but not too far across the way. The more you get to know each other, the longer you get to know each other, the deeper your experiences come together. Somewhere along the way, you're going to be the head of, a big program at NASA, and you're going to be the head of the big program at NOAA. And you guys are going to, your bosses are going to have a challenge along the way, and you're going to be able to work together because you guys have lived together and you had experiences together. Same thing with people who are working on the Hill and folks that are working in the executive branch. You'd be shocked at how easy it is to pick up the phone, call somebody, and go, I heard you have a problem, let's work it out. Instead, what do people often do? They noodle over these things. They start bringing conspiracy theories like, I think he thinks this, or I think she thinks that. Or you can just pick up the phone and call them because you know them. You have their phone number, right? And at a junior level, that makes sense. But often, as you get higher and higher, people start freaking out, I think is the technical term. Like, you're going to call who? About what? And then the staffing function happens below them along the way. But, it's literally a phone call. And I know COVID makes it more difficult, but now as we're becoming a little bit freer in being able to interact with people, I think those experiences are helpful. The other thing I'd highlight is I learned a little bit about different styles of, not styles of leadership, different leadership. And there's three in particular that I think you should be aware of. And every one of them are areas where you could go into these areas. The first one is the most obvious one, which is just the hierarchical leadership. When you talk about, hey, where are you in the org chart? Pretty simple, right? How many people work for you, and you're the decision maker along the way. I'd say the next one is implied leadership. And often a lot of people, particularly those of you that work in Congress, as staffers in Congress, whether you're personal or committee staff, it's positional in the sense of who you are influencing directly, or maybe you're a budget person and you're very close to the budget. And so that you may not have the org chart element, but you have implied power from that perspective. But I'd say the last one, and the one that most people don't recognize, and every one of you probably have this, is reputational leadership. And your career trajectories that you begin today is the foundation for that. People have long memories, and something that you do good for somebody along the way reflects decades. Now I can say that term, right? In contrast, if there's something where you did ill towards somebody, it doesn't last forever, but it takes time to be able to heal those wounds. And it's no different than friendship along the way. But I'd say in the same type of element, your reputational leadership, where I can just pick up the phone and go, I know if I ask you this problem, you're going to be able to handle it along the way. And I would say that having witnessed what particularly, this is obviously hierarchical leadership as well as reputational leadership, but the way that I was able to watch, particularly how President Obama was able to navigate some very interesting issues along the way, space-related, not space-related, was amazing. And I think a lot of that had to do particularly with the fact that, he developed these types of relationships early on. Same thing with the vice president. What she does and how she's able to bring people together, organizations together, people together, I think it's remarkable. And particularly at your level right now, don't just run, but take a second to just stop and observe how other people are doing things as well. Try to write them down. I've been bad at writing these things down, and I remember I should have written this thing down back in the day when I saw how Lori Garver interacted with this committee on the Hill and was able to actually convince them to do X, Y, or Z. These are the types of things that you'll draw upon as you go through your leadership, through your careers along the way there. Last thing I'll say is this. The problems that we face today will be solved by the experiences that you have today and tomorrow. There's a lot of challenges along the way, whether we're talking national security, we're talking commercial, we're talking regulatory, we're talking international, and so on and so forth. But what's different today than in the past is the toolbox that you have for opportunity is far greater than we had a decade or two ago. And hopefully it'll be far less than what you'll have a decade or two from now. And that really sets you guys up to basically be the next generation. I mean, a lot of preaching, of course, about please stay in the community, please do STEM, please come work in the government. I went into the private sector. I'll give you my one element here. You want to be at the table? Do you want to make the big decisions? Do you want to make decisions that are almost unquantifiable? Do you want to make decisions that sometimes a decade or two from now, you'll sit back and go, I had a part to do with that, or maybe I fully did that? Is almost exclusively an opportunity and to feel like just great about it. That's the kind of feeling that brought me back into the government along the way. So I'll end with this element here, which is I told you my story began with a space shuttle launch back in second grade. That's not true, of course, right? My story began when I was born in India. What's amazing is this country, if I might be a little bit emotional about this, I guess. When I was born, my parents left India to give me an opportunity, their first child, an opportunity to go and explore this land called America. And they left their careers, both college educated. My dad worked in a hotel. My mom worked as a seamstress, but they were both college educated. Those are the jobs I didn't get here. Over the course of that career arc, I had the opportunity to pay them back in a way that I thought it was just kind of course of the day. When I got to leave the White House the first time when I was in the National Security Council, President Obama said, "Hey, let's do kind of an exit interview. Let's bring your family." So there we are in the Oval Office with President Obama, and had the opportunity to sit back and look. I remember there he is talking to my mom and my dad and my sister, and I'm thinking there, like, never in their wildest dreams did they ever think that they would be in the Oval Office, the most powerful person in the world, with their son, right, having this kind of opportunity. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about any career, but I think particularly the space career, is like any dream is possible. Mine is just one example of many. I'm sure every speaker here has got their own story along the way. But I don't think I'm anything remarkable or unique. It was just a passion to keep going in this industry, and who knows where you guys end up along the way. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm happy to take any questions if we have some time. Back here. Yeah, so the question was on developing a space traffic management coordination function within the Department of Commerce. A lot of studies have been put on that. We were very happy that we were able to get Richard Dobello into that position of leadership here recently to run the Office of Space Commerce. He's working very closely with the Department of Defense right now, both with Space Force as well as U.S. Space Command, to be able to develop that linkage, to be able to transition that mission from the Department of Defense over to Commerce. One of the big pieces with respect to that is the funding to be able to develop that has been very small over its time frame because of all the studies and then the change of leadership along the way. But I think particularly what we've done is, we're putting our money where our mouth is. And so in the President's FY23 budget, we have almost 8x'd the budget, so we can now start building the investments and the architecture and infrastructure. So they are now starting to go through literally the architectural reviews on how to be able to build out that type of prototype and capability and partner with the commercial sector to be able to leverage that as much as we can as well. Yep, back here. Yeah, thank you very much. So the question was on how problem-solving skill set as my aperture opened. I will actually say it hasn't changed very much. And actually, the problem-solving skill set, particularly for those that have been or are in the STEM career field, or basically took high school physics, it's the scientific method. And the scientific method works as well for policy matters as it does for science, technology, engineering. And particularly, there is a problem that you're trying to solve, right? Whether it's space traffic management or it is a resiliency of our space architecture, right? And very appropriate topics that we're all really focused on right now. And so when we think about it, like, all right, what do we need to understand? And one of the first things is, all right, we know where we think we want to be. That's our hypothesis. And one of the things, and particularly I use this from my intelligence community background, first thing you do is you gather a lot of information. You don't just gather that a lot of information from any one entity. You get a lot of information from a lot of entities along the way. So you get diversity of knowledge. That's one of the things particularly that we're happy with the Office of Space Commerce is they can represent an industry perspective in our interagency dialogues. And so you get what's an adversary think about this? What do our allies and partners think about this? What do the commercial industry think about this? And what do our departments and agencies think about this, to include FAA? And then we think about, okay, what should we do? And if you can imagine, not everybody agrees. And so what happens then is you develop a set of options. And you work through these options. It is tough slogging to work through these options. And you try to find compromise along the way. And then what you do is there's going to be areas where you have stalwart positions, right? Government versus commercial, disaggregated versus singular system, right? And of course, you can understand several of the different issues that particularly within AST that you guys have too. And if you can't come to an agreement, one of the nice things that we have at the Space Council and we had at the National Security Council is an interagency process. So we have it at effectively a deputy assistant secretary level, an assistant secretary level, and then the deputies of heads of departments and agencies, then the heads of the departments and agencies, which is the Space Council level. That would go to the vice president for a decision. And if you really, really need to bring in the president, then you bring in the president along the way, and the president will be the decision maker. Now, you can also work with our allies and partners on the Hill and get it legislated as well. That sometimes takes a longer period of time as well. But there's different ways to look at that, but we always try to look at it from, let's figure out what the problem is, let's get all the information together, and let's develop courses of actions along the way. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So the council is actually legislated, but each administration has its whether or not it chooses to establish the council and its the capacity in this administration, the last one. So I really can't speak on future administrations. That'll have to be their decisions along the way. I think one of the challenges, it's not really a challenge, it's really just the great opportunity more than anything is bringing in different sectors of, like I talked about, interior, agriculture, education, into the fold here and say, you're as important about space, as all these other members there. And these are organizations that particularly might not have a person focused on space policy, may not have a person focused, on space-based sensors to enable STEM or climate along the way. And really, it's we know who the who's a who. Again, Kevin Bacon analogy, right? We know the who's in the traditional space sectors or organizations, right? Whether we're talking NASA, DoD, IC, NOAA, and so on and so forth. But I think early on, it was trying to find out who would be the appropriate point of contact. I mean, we know the deputy and the secretary of departments and agencies, but who will be that person that will be the entity that is going to be the one championing the causes and the policies and goals of the administration? And so, we worked through that early when I came on board, and now we have all the right people aligned at that point. Hi. Nice to see you. Yeah. So the question is about navigating when you're kind of a first in your family or your sector here. And I should highlight one thing here, and particularly large focus when we talk about STEM as well is, and look, I mean, it's the diversity, equity, inclusiveness. I talked about the fact of, I'll get back to your question in a second, but it does remind me of something I wanted to say. This group is, we have the opportunity, there's such a large focus right now on diversity, equity, inclusiveness, that this is the opportunity to plant some seeds that will sprout over decades, right? And so where organizations are finding it challenging to build a more diverse workforce right now, because this generation or that generation might not be as diverse, we have the opportunity to make that not a problem anymore. And so particularly on being a first in a generation, I'll tell you, from my parents' perspective, it was just tons of support. Everything that I thought was a small thing then got reflected to my parents, who then were on the WhatsApp chat back to India, and it was like a major thing along the way. And to me, I think it was really important to have a community, a support system, whether it's friends, coworkers, and/or family. And for some, it can't be all three, and that's understandable, right? But I think it's really, really hard when you're the island and you're trying to find somebody to get advice from, or you're trying to find somebody to cry with, right? And you need people. And to me, opportunity will show itself along the way, but you really need people to be able to be along for the journey. So if you have a setback, you have a setback, right? But sometimes you have a really good day, right? And you want to high five some people. And the people you want to high five are the people who get it. And to me, that was the most important part about, for me, is going back to the unique element of first. I also had a small group of friends who were also from a similar kind of background as me. And so they were also achieving some successes in their particular sectors, not space. But it was once in a while good to reflect on, like, hey, we can't, when here, public school product, right, and so on, and so public university product, and yet we were okay, and we did fun. So I'll take one more question, and then I know there's a reception that you guys are all angling towards. So, okay. Yes, sir. Yep. So in our Vice President Harris released on December 1st, our Space Priorities Framework. And a non-insignificant portion of that talked about the sustainability of the space environment, and particularly about things like debris remediation and removal along the way. Both DoD and NASA are investing in capabilities from a government perspective. Companies like Astroscale and others are doing this from a private sector perspective as well, and we're partnering with companies to be able to look at those capabilities. I think the real challenge right now is, how do you, the conversations are happening, right? Like, right now it's back to the question that we had from the back of the room, like how do we monitor the environment in the first place? And then from that, how do we then develop capabilities to be able to remediate some of these challenges that we have? And then finally, what are the types of policies and regulations that we need to put on top of that to be able to ensure that we have sustainability of the space architecture? So entities like DoD, like Department of Commerce, like NASA are currently both investing in capabilities through partnerships as well as government programs, unique government programs, but also I think it's also talking about like what is the structure that we need to have. What's also noteworthy that I think everybody should be aware of, it's not just us. You look at what's happening, the conversations in Europe, of course, Astroscale started in Japan, the conversations are in Japan, Australia, like almost every country that has a role in space is understanding and becoming aware of this. And so this is also becoming not just what's happening in the highest levels of the US government, but this is also what's happening at the highest levels across governments as well. And I think what you're going to soon see is more of that conversation going across the board, across multiple governments at very senior levels. So, okay, I can talk more about it later on as well. So, okay, well, I think that's all the time I probably have at this point, right, Brad? Okay, all right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chirag, and really appreciate how generous you've been with your time today to join us. We know you have a lot going on. We're so grateful for you to be here and speak with us.